Here's what you need to know. In the 1950s, the United States was already hard at work experimenting with the idea of launching large missiles from submarines, in the early stages of what would become America's seaward leg of the nuclear triad. In fact, the concept seemed so promising that some Navy officials began to wonder if they could launch small fighters from the hull of a submarine, just like they could with missiles. Today, America's nuclear-powered aircraft carriers and ballistic missile submarines represent two of the most potent forms of force projection wielded by any force in military history. For a short time in the late 1950s, America had plans to put them together into a single G.I. Joe-style superweapon, a submarine aircraft carrier. Of course, not all military planning was based on finding new ways to use nuclear weapons. There was also a pressing need to develop strategies and technologies that would be able to fight after the first few volleys of a nuclear exchange. One area of particular concern was America's newfound air power. At the onset of World War II, the United States maintained just 2,500 or so military aircraft, but by the end of the war, America was an aviation powerhouse. With more than 300,000 tactical aircraft and a fleet of the most advanced bombers on Earth, the B-29 Stratofortress, America knew a potential World War III would be fought largely in the skies, but that posed a problem. How do you launch aircraft after all your airfields have been erased by nuclear hellfire? That question led to a number of interesting programs, including the UFO-like VZ-9 Avrocar that theoretically wouldn't need runways to take off. Another strategy first introduced in the 1950s called for a fleet of fighters that didn't need runways, or even hangars that could be targeted by enemy bombers. Instead, the US Navy wanted to launch fighter jets from submarines, just like they had been experimenting with launching cruise missiles. World War II had proven the value of aircraft carriers to the US Navy, but after losing 5 such vessels, and 7 more escort carriers in the conflict, the Navy could see the value of an aircraft carrier that could submerge after launching its fighters. Using the halibut as a model, the US Navy devised the N-1 submarine aircraft carrier, which would carry 8 fighters stored within 2 hangars inside the ship's hull. In order to launch the fighters, the submarine would surface and orient the fighters straight up to be launched vertically. In order to manage the vertical launch, separate boosters would be affixed to the aircraft once they were on the launch rail. Those boosters would then fire, propelling the fighter into the air with enough speed and altitude for the fighter's own engines to keep it flying. Without sufficient deck space for such landings on a submarine, Boeing considered having its N-1 fighters land vertically just like they took off. In theory, it was possible, but tests of such a landing approach proved too risky for all but the most experienced pilots. In order to land vertically with the engine facing the deck of the ship, the pilots would have to turn and look over their shoulder during landing, like using a jet engine to back into a parking spot from above, knowing full well that your aircraft, and potentially the submarine, would explode if you made even the slightest mistake.